Up next, we have Scott Bush. Scott is the lead organizer of Eastern Nebraska Patriots. He is a small business owner for the last 6 years here in Omaha, and he has 2 children that he sees being affected by mask mandates.
Yeah, I will. You'll be fine. Everybody else is fine. Yeah. Well, no, Joe, he was supposed to go last. We're supposed to have Dr. Tapper after me and then Dr.
Thank you, baby.
I don't know. Joe, you're going out of order.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He said, oh.
Well, he said no. Can we roll with it? Can we roll with it?
Yeah, if they're setting up.
He's the second on the list, but he says 3. All right, check that. We will go ahead and wait on Scott. Up next is Dr. Lee Merritt.
You get up there. Don't hurt her.
Yeah, that's my fault, Scott. Sorry about that. Dr. Merritt is a spinal surgeon and a retired naval surgeon with experience in biowarfare. She has become a warrior for our movement.
Oh.
Dr. Merritt?
Get you another one.
There's lots, honey. Woo! Dr. Merritt! Woo!
All right.
What you doing, babe?
Well, Joe, I got to tell you, in the Marine Corps, there's a joke in the Navy that the Marines are looking for a few good men. They found them in Navy surgeons. That's an inside joke.
Love it.
Look, I want to thank all of you. You guys are unbelievable. I'm so glad to find you. I've been sitting home wondering, am I alone in thinking this whole mess is crazy? And then I said, the mask mandate's my stopping point. Okay, we can't tolerate this anymore. So I called up the Association of American Physicians and Surgeons. That group has been the voice of private practice since 1943, trying to stop government medicine. And their motto is all for the patient. And so I said, do you have any Nebraska and Iowa doctors? Yeah, I know you do. Give me the list. And I contacted every one. And then someone said, you need to contact Dr. Ben Tapper. He spoke to the city council. Well, that was the best thing I did. I had some people, I had about 5 or 6 of the other doctors call me. But as a parenthetical point, I would just say I feel like I've been from the Flat Earth Society most of my professional career, and the chiropractors are practicing medicine the way we should have been doing it all along. But he has been a leader, and I've met all these great people that have put these groups together and have been fighting this. So I'm just here to help you in any way I can. Now, Dr. Tappert asked me to just talk about kind of what I talked about in Las Vegas. And I do have a talk on the internet. You can find the details. I talked about SARS-CoV-2 and the rise of medical technocracy. And, what I've come to the conclusion is that we're at war. We may not know who the enemy is. It's a great stealth war, and there's a lot of suspects we can come up with. But this is a bad time in history if we don't win this war. George Orwell talks about the boot on the face of humanity forever. We didn't recognize it, but I think the boot is more like a ballet slipper, and it's this mask. That's why we have to stand up for the mask mandate. Now, I told Ben I would talk briefly about what I consider the 4 big lies of COVID. And the first lie is the death numbers. Okay?
Yes.
If you look at it, this year you had globally, worldwide, if you look at the number of people died versus the number of people on Earth, 99.991% have survived this. Okay, I'll take those odds to Vegas. Last year, with a standard flu season that they said was bad, and by the way, in spite of the vaccines, you notice the flu season gets worse every year in their numbers. They had 99.992% survival. Does that make sense to shut down our whole world and our economy and everything we're doing for those numbers? And children have less of a chance of dying of COVID than they do of being struck by lightning. I don't think we shut down schools because it's lightning season.
Right.
This is the nonsense of this whole thing. Now, I reviewed all this stuff years ago. What my concern was smallpox. And I'm going to tell you, there are bad things out there. I'm not saying there isn't a time to go to ground. When this virus came out of China,
I watched it, and my first thought was this could be a genetically directed bioweapon. I'm not going to get panicky yet. Then it went to Italy, and that's when it started to worry me, because quite frankly we saw doctors dying. And I'm just going to give you this little tip. When you see doctors dying uncontrollably and they're not figuring it out, it's time to go to your basement. Okay? Now, but we figured it out. And so as time has gone on, this virus has passed through human generation after generation and has become weaker. That's what viruses do. There's no question that this virus was more deadly at the first, but it's not now. We're dealing with a flu-like illness for most people. And so the death rate has gone way down. We need to open up society. Unfortunately, there's a group of epidemiologists that I cited to the City Council, not that it mattered, who have written the Great Barrington Declaration. You can get online and sign it. I don't agree with exactly everything they say in the Declaration, but their main point is this. We need to open up society totally and just protect the very sick, the very vulnerable.
Yes.
Now, we only had 500 deaths of COVID so far, and 40% were in nursing homes, so let's protect them. And we actually, the saddest thing in this whole thing is we know how to do this. So then I'm going to get to the second lie of COVID. And that, well, let me do social distancing first, because I think that is really kind of funny. I mean, when they said, oh, you have to stand 6 feet apart from each other, I said that is a made-up number. Nobody comes up in research with a 6-foot answer.
Exactly.
You know? So Lydia Baruba, who's actually a real scientist at MIT, showed that this virus, as you're just talking, and any virus of this particle size, will go 27.5 feet,
yep.
27.2 feet. Now that's a real research number. And so the social distancing is hysterical if it weren't, again, such a symbol of compliance. This virus is very, very tiny. It's 0.12 microns. It cannot be contained by masks. And in contrast to what the chief of the medical department of Douglas County said, about 172 papers showing you that it does, that they work, they don't work. And you can find that out if you look up the science yourself. There's only been one controlled study of cloth masks, and the CDC reported it, and it didn't. Not only did it not work, it made things worse. People were more apt to get sick if they were wearing a cloth mask. So that's another. These are some of the other lies. But the biggest lie of all here, I'm going to talk to you about, is hydroxychloroquine.
Yep.
We know how to treat this disease, and we know how to protect you from getting the disease. Now, as I was sitting around and I kept saying, we pay billions of dollars to the CDC and the NIH. And by the way, years ago, it's just a funny sidelight, I fell asleep in front of Tony Fauci at a lecture one day. There were only 4 of us in the room. I think he noticed. But,
oh my God, I love her.
These guys are not dumb. They know these things. And when I was watching this and watching all the stuff they were saying, they were wrong about everything. I give them a credit. They could be wrong about a few things, but when you're wrong about everything. Either by commission, in other words, you tell us something that's not true, or by omission, you don't tell us what you should tell us to help us, there's a problem.
Yep.
So the first thing I'm going to tell you is what you can do to help yourself. The CDC, in spite of their billions of dollars, didn't really drill down on the people dying. I kept saying, why doesn't somebody look at those people in the ICU and the people dying? What is different about them? Because most people that get this just walk away. So what is different about them? Number one, the Indonesians showed that if your vitamin D level is above 30, that's the magic number on your report, that you're less than 5% chance to end up in the ICU or dead. 96.4% of the people in the ICU or dead had a vitamin D level below 30. That's an important point, and you can't get it from the sun above the northern latitudes, no matter how. You just have to supplement. It's cheap, it's effective, do it. Everybody should do that. And obese people are more at risk. Why, we don't know for sure, but I have a feeling it has to do with sequestration of vitamin D. So I take 10,000 units a day. If I were you, I'd take a little bit more if you have extra weight. The second thing is they just showed out that zinc deficiency, 50% of the people that are very ill have a zinc deficiency. Now, why couldn't they tell us this, the CDC? They're supposed to be the Center for Disease Control instead of the Center for Vaccine Protection or Promotion. Woo. Now, the other thing is the Department of Defense itself published an article in January looking at the effect of flu vaccine on whether or not you got other viruses. So young, healthy, active duty people and their spouses and their dependents, and they looked at people that took the flu vaccine and people that didn't and what happened. And it turned out, and they published this, this was from the 2017-2018 flu season, that these young healthy people, if they took the flu vaccine, had a 36% increased risk of getting coronavirus.
Yep.
And in spite of that fact, the CDC and the Veterans Administration on their website continued to promote getting a flu vaccine. The CDC knows the problem, so they slyly and silently took it off in roughly the 1st of May. But I think it's still on the VA website. And if I would, and I am a veteran, I would be a little pissed about that. And there's a study out from Britain that people are actually at a more risk of death if you're over 65 and take the flu shot. You're more at risk of death from COVID. So it may turn out that's not completely the answer, but the precautionary principle says they should tell us these things, right? They should tell us these things.
Yeah.
Now, let me just say that, my new motto is, if it's censored, I read it or watch it, and if they're against it, I'm probably going to be for it, because they have gone out of their way to tell us how bad hydroxychloroquine is.
Yeah.
I mean, and I'd like to thank, by the way, Chris Baker's here. We were just talking about that. He's been a voice of freedom in this. He deserves a hand. But we were just talking about this, and he said that when one of the authority figures in medicine comes on his show, they go out of their way to dismiss hydroxychloroquine.
Yes.
Well, let me tell you a story that should tell you all you need to know about this. So, well, two stories. First of all, the Lancet, the Lancet and the New England Journal of Medicine are two of the most prestigious journals in the world, right, for medicine. They published an article that in each of the journals that purported to say, we've looked through, we have a database, and we've looked at all the studies of people treating patients with hydroxychloroquine, and it doesn't matter. That's what they said in these articles. Now, it's very hard to get a publication in these journals. They have to go through 3 peer reviewers, and they really go over your paper with a fine-tooth comb, usually. But what happened is, somebody asked them for their data, and not only could they not provide the data, they couldn't even provide, they had a source for the database. The company called Surgisphere that claimed they had amassed all these papers from all over the world, their science person was actually a science fiction writer.
Wow.
And you can't make this up.
My God.
Their only other employee of note was actually an adult sex worker.
What?
I'm not kidding you. This is the level of depravity to which these people have gone to lie to us about that hydroxychloroquine doesn't work. Now, the other thing is, the good one was the one that you may have heard about that showed that countries that use hydroxychloroquine early have a 78% decrease in death rate of COVID. So, and I believe that number, because the worst place in the world, one of the things people want to know, right? If you're sitting on your porch in Arkansas, what's your real chance of dying? We know the global rate, but what does it matter where you are? Well, I can tell you, don't go to New York. The worst place in the world to get COVID by death per capita is New York, and specifically New York City. Of course, Fauci gave them the award for handling COVID. You got to ask yourself. So their death rate was 0.17%. In Senegal and Nigeria, the death rate, get this, is 0.00004%.
Yep.
In other words, it's 10,000 times safer to be in a third world sub-Saharan African country than it is to be in New York, where they have all the modern medicine. Now, why is that?
What does that tell you?
Well, it isn't just about temperature. Humidity makes a difference. Humidity is the #1 thing that stops transmission of viruses. What really made a difference is, and I have patients that told me this, in Nigeria and in Senegal, they can buy hydroxychloroquine over the counter.
Wow.
They go out, and one of the things I learned looking at the literature about this, that malaria used to be in the Vietnam area, we couldn't use chloroquine because malaria had become resistant, but now it's not anymore. So we're using cheaper chloroquine and the hydroxychloroquine for the malaria in sub-Saharan Africa. They get sick, they get a fever for a few days, they go down, they get a few days worth of that, done. Okay? So what's the big ugly picture here? The really big lie. For 40 years, I found evidence back to 1974 where the scientific community knew about these agents. It's not just hydroxychloroquine. It's doxycycline. It's ivermectin. There's a bunch of them. They knew about these so-called lysosomotropic agents, and they didn't seem to tell anybody. No research was done. We're out worried about smallpox. People are dying of the flu, right? So the next time they tell you, take your flu shot because 80,000 people last year died of the flu, just keep in mind, they have let that happen year after year after year after year. In 2006, the Chinese actually published a study about influenza A in the Petri dish and showed that chloroquine just wipes it out. So they've been lying to you, and people are dying because of it.
Yep.
That is moral bankruptcy beyond which I can just wrap my head around. So hydroxychloroquine works. If we really wanted to save the Nebraskans this year, what we should be doing, we shouldn't be worried about a vaccine. We should make hydroxychloroquine available to anybody who's at high risk and
Yes.
anybody.
Yes.
We should make it so that you can, we have, like naltrexone, we have drugs that are much more of a potential issue than this. They tried to make, oh, by the way, they tried to tell you it was a heart-damaging medicine, and real doctors that really treat patients with this drug, they all just laughed at that because we've given billions of doses over millions of patients, and that's just not seen. But it's amazing that they've hidden it from even academic physicians. So you think about the high level, when we're thinking about a bad guy to blame with all this, think about the high level juice it took for somebody to censor the medical literature, to ban discussion of this in medical schools and pharmaceutical schools for years, for at least 20 years. So that's the really biggest lie. And we have to take back, the mask is a lie too, trust me on that. And the mask, I'll finish with this, one of the very finest guys I heard talk about the mask, I gave, on my Las Vegas talk, I talk about all the science stuff and why it doesn't work. But he just got up the night before at the dinner meeting, and this guy's a bright guy, he's a PhD from Princeton in physics, I think he's not too dumb. But he said, he showed a picture of the Manchu Q. Now, those of us who grew up in Omaha area, I mean, this was where the railroads went out west, and we all had the Chinese come out to work on the railroads. They came out here to work on the railroads, and they were not Manchu, but they were wearing a big braid that went down to their waistline, and that was called a Q. And it was called the Manchu Q. Why? Because those were Han Chinese. They had been conquered by the Manchu, and the Manchu insisted that they wear this hairdress, this long braid, as a symbol of submission to the Manchu dynasty.
Wow.
And they took it so seriously that the Chinese Manchu would send out Secret Service agents. You see some of this in the kung fu shows, the old kung fu shows. They would send people out, and they would kill Chinese who would cut off their queue, because that is a sign of submission.
Wow.
And what his point was, then he put up a picture of the mask. And that's where we are.
Yes.
And I think, the good news about this is, I think we're going to win this war because there is no other option.
Yes.
I don't want my children to go in. Yeah, really. I don't want my children, who sometimes think I'm a little crazy, as children always do, of their parents, but I said, you guys can be anarchists and nihilists and just sit in your bathtub and drink sherry and watch the world collapse. But I'm not going to do that, because I don't want your children to grow up in darkness. I don't want the rest of the people. There's so many people that says, I'll just let somebody else fight this, right? Well, thank you all for fighting it. And I'm really pleased I met you guys. Thank you. I was getting a little paranoid. I was all by myself. And now I'm in good company. Thanks again.
Woo! Thank you! Woo! Hi.
Wait, you have two phones?
No.